Welcome, Podlers. F. Scott Fitzgerald's quote, "There are no second acts in American lives," comes from The Last Tycoon, his portrait of Hollywood and the great American film executive Irving Thalberg. This week's guest, David Smyth, is a Hollywood film exec who already has a second and third act and is hoping his new AVOD service, YouLook, will be a fourth. David talks about his career at Sky, 20th Century Fox, and the launch of his new service, and how he couldn't get arrested in Romania with The Simpsons. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, David. Welcome to the pod.
Hi, Danny. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Let's jump straight in. How did you get started in the world of TV? I saw that Carlton was the first port of call, and I wondered if there was a future Prime Minister working there at the time.
There were a number of different sides to Carlton. There was the TV broadcaster, and that was the piece that I worked for. So I was in audience research. And then there was Carlton Communications, Carlton Comms, and that was sort of Hyde Park Corner, and that was where David Cameron resided. And I never met him, no.
He feels like more of a Knightsbridge kind of guy than on the advertising side.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And then how did things evolve from there?
At that time, I went for a job at JWT, which was before Mindshare, so it was a full service agency at that time, and I had a really nice time there. Some great people, but once you step out of TV, and if it's your thing, what occurred to me at that time is I wanted to get right back into TV as quickly as I could. So then I moved to the BBC, where I stayed for 4 years, and I started by doing media planning on BBC One. And then moved into the scheduling team a couple of years after that. And I was scheduling BBC One and BBC Two in daytime. That was a really great time, actually. It was a really good, fun time. I fancied a bit of a change of scene, a bit of a cold bath to get into, so I thought I'd go over to Sky. And yeah, sure enough, moving from the BBC to Sky was like getting into a cold bath. But it was I had a great time there too.
And you ended up heading acquisitions on the series side at Sky. Very big difference from the world of the BBC, I would imagine, culturally.
Yeah, I mean, it was culturally different, and certainly in those early years at Sky, it was sort of the tail end of the kind of mean, guttural, we're outsiders and everyone hates us and we like it that way. But then things began to change. Dawn Airy came, Sophie Turner-Lang, who had a very good relationship, came along as well. And it started to move, I guess, towards being part of the establishment as it grew up and as it became more corporate, and it became less kind of wild than it had been when it was set up.
And then you made the move to 20th Century Fox. How hard was it making a shift from being a buyer to a seller?
First thing I noticed was that if you're a broadcaster and you're in acquisitions or scheduling or marketing, wherever it is, broadcasting is quite a kind of a labor-intensive endeavor, and you're constantly in meetings because you're on the steering group of this, and you've got to meet with scheduling to talk about that, and here's marketing, and here's finance and legal and so on. And so there was a lot of interaction, a lot of meetings with other divisions, and I didn't have a lot of time. So one of the first things that was really surprising to me in joining Fox was the comparative kind of lack of clutter in the diary, and the ability to sort of just crack on and do your job. That was really interesting to me, certainly initially, and I was almost kind of worried about, why aren't there more meetings in my diary? But it was something I got my head around pretty quickly, and you're very much held to account for your numbers, and so there's a lot of kind of strategic purity in being accountable in that way. And I kind of took to that. I like that kind of sense of measurement. It keeps you on your toes. And I'm not a natural salesperson. I'm not the kind of person that says, okay, guys, here's a great pitch, just gather around. I'll talk nonstop for half. But I began to enjoy it a lot. And somebody likened it to just learning to fold your arms the other way. And so partly I did it because I wanted to demonstrate that I could do it. But I had a great time at Fox, and it was a wonderful culture to be part of, and it encouraged entrepreneurial spirit and encouraged accountability.
To what extent do you need to be, as you describe, a natural salesman or salesperson when you're in a distribution job? How much selling actually happens when you work for a major US studio?
It depends on the mix of content that you've got. It's not that hard to sell Avatar or Home Alone and certain brands like that. You know, those are highly desirable, and there will be competition for it. So it is about managing that as much as it is pure selling. But a lot of the content that we had and were asked to represent was more challenging and didn't fit into neat little boxes that invited competition. You did have to explain, incentivize, and to help buyers take to those properties, to suggest ways in which audiences might come to them. So there was it depended on which content you're talking about.
Have you got examples? If looking back, what were the shows or the movies that you look back on and think, actually, that was really hard?
I mean, selling the Americans into Russia is quite a challenging concept. FX is a really good example. A lot of the FX series are not that commercial. So you want to talk to clients who understand that and who want to nurture it and to bring an audience to it because it's FX content. One of the last things I did at Fox actually was to do an output agreement with the BBC for the FX content. So it's that kind of thing. That is a little bit more challenging, and you know, I'm proud of those kinds of deals because they weren't the obvious thing to do.
If you had to pick one show that you would have liked to have bought that you didn't get the chance to buy, and one that you would have loved to have sold that you didn't get a chance to sell, what would you pick?
A really interesting question. I'd love to have bought Game of Thrones, and a show that I would love to have sold. I love Schitt's Creek. We're watching that right now. I think that's a fantastic show. And you know, The Sopranos would have been a great thing too. But you know, there's a lot of that kind of high end, I guess, more cable stuff that I kind of naturally feel an affinity with. But
I think it's an interesting question when you're in a distribution role, because there's part of you that wants to be associated with a show that has a lot of critical acclaim. So for me, that would be Breaking Bad. That was a show that I brought into the international market, and it was not an easy sell in many ways. But you look back and think that's a great show to have one's name associated with. But then there's also that sense of wanting to have something that everybody really does want. Breaking Bad didn't fall into that category immediately, although it did later on. So to have had The Simpsons, for example, and to have been involved in some of those big bidding wars, particularly in the UK, that would have been very exciting, I think, from a sales point of view.
Yeah, absolutely, and but it's different. It means different things in different countries, as you know, and so The Simpsons is incredibly valuable here in the UK, but of course it doesn't go everywhere. And you know, I remember couldn't get arrested trying to sell it in Romania, for instance, or places like that. So yeah, I mean, but I do remember, it's just you triggered my memory about Breaking Bad. I remember you selling Breaking Bad. I remember passing on it, and it's one of those things that, you know, as a
lot of people did.
Yeah, well, right. I mean,
Jason Thorpe was the one who saw it first, or was willing to invest in it first.
Yeah, and it's and those, when you see the potential of something that no one else sees, you're very proud of those moments, and when you pass on something that becomes a huge hit, you kind of feel slightly like embarrassed about it too. So, yeah, I'm familiar with both of those feelings.
So there you are at 20th Century Fox. You've been there a long time.
Yeah,
it's a massive studio with very storied history. It's like 100 years old.
Right.
And then suddenly these reports are coming out that Disney are potentially going to buy it, which just seemed crazy. As an outsider, it seemed crazy. What was your reaction from being inside the camp? Because it's so unexpected.
Yeah, it was very unexpected. So my first reaction was disbelief. I actually, and I mean that in its truest sense. I just simply didn't believe it, because I didn't think it was credible. It felt like it hadn't been that long since Fox had been associated with buying Warner Brothers, for instance. So it kind of felt that you know, from my perspective, well, Fox, that doesn't happen to Fox, right? Fox is the one that buys. But of course, it makes more and more sense the more you think about it. At that time, I'm not talking about the idea of Fox being bought by Disney makes more and more sense. That's a separate thing. But it was the beginning of what we're still continuing to see play out in Hollywood. And the vertical integration of content and services that's the move. So it was simply the kind of the opening gunfire in the battle that continues to kind of be fought today, really.
And you're now at an exciting time in launching a new AVOD service called YouLook, and right. It would be great to find out more about that.
From my perspective, AVOD feels like a natural space to be in, because I think that's going to be the growth story for the next few years. And you've got to satisfy two competing ambitions in AVOD. There's this tension between narrow and broad. And to be interesting to advertisers, which you've got to be if you're going to be a successful AVOD service, you've got to be specific and tightly targeted, and that tends to suggest niche and fan groups and specificity. But you've also got to be broad, because you've got to attract enough eyeballs to be interesting so that you can scale. And how you're able to satisfy both of those competing ambitions inside the same services that is the key. And so that's when I thought, right, well, what we've got to do then is we've got to build a number of different channels, on-demand destinations, verticals. You've got to assemble a number of these different targeted destinations under one roof, powered by one engine. And that's the idea that I came up with, and that really formed the basis of YouLook. And it's called YouLook because I want people to come in and look. I want this to be a lean forward service as opposed to a lean back service. So it is set up in such a way as to kind of encourage discovery and encourage exploration, and encourage dialogue. We want to have a dialogue with the audience. There's an opportunity for audiences to interact with each other inside the service. So the ambition is for it to be a lean-in service very much. So that's YouLook. We went live at about 5 p.m. on New Year's Eve. So because I was very keen to launch in 2020.
And what's the content proposition? What can you get on YouLook?
At the moment, you can get horror films, you can get classic movies and classic TV, you can get food and drink, you can get sports. There's a sports offering. At the moment there's motorsport, but we're going to be adding extreme sports and boxing and some equestrian sports to that in the coming weeks. There's a food and drink offering. There is shortly going to be a music offering, which has got some jazz concerts, some classical music, some music awards shows, some rock docs, and so on. So very much in the unscripted arena at the moment, notwithstanding the film content and some of the classic TV, but we certainly want to be in scripted going forward. But we're going to be building it out to include other verticals, like we want to be strong in fashion, we want to be strong in paranormal, in travel, in history, and I think that's and in health and wellness. And I think that's probably enough to be kind of going on with for the moment, because we want to get to a point in a few months' time where we can really drill down into the data and see what's working and what's not, and then tilt the service towards greater consumption.
And UK only, or available internationally?
UK and Ireland at the moment, although the classic films and the horror films piece is for the moment on a global basis, but everything else is territory specific. We can turn territories on and off at the title level, so it's pretty flexible that way. But by and large, yeah, UK and Ireland right now. International rollout probably in the years to come.
How do you compete with the likes of Google and the free-to-air guys who already have a very strong offering, right, in AVOD? There's Pluto. It's quite a tough market already.
If we take a UK viewer, well, let's think about the things that they're going to need. Terrestrials, right? Everyone's got those. Premium sports and movies, okay. If I'm into that, there's an avenue I can get hold of those. A bundled SVOD offering, okay. I've got my Netflix subscription, my Amazon Prime, maybe my Disney Plus, and so on. There's a bundle there. What else? Well, I think what else is just give me something fun. Give me something that feels specific, that has a tone of voice, that is free, that I don't have to pay for, because I'm paying for enough right now. If I'm paying for a number of SVOD services, as well as for premium content on pay TV, there's enough money going out of my account already, especially in these straitened times. So here's just something that's a little bit different, that has a bit of color and is free. That's where we see our opportunity.
And big challenges in doing this during lockdown?
The early months of lockdown, from I guess March through to sort of May, were actually quite helpful, because that was when I was doing the most amount of kind of navel gazing and thinking about designing the service and what it should be, and talking to people about brand, and talking to platforms about being tech suppliers. And you don't have to be that kind of present to do that. But certainly getting out there now and talking to content suppliers and talking to those on the advertising side of the business, that there's a lot of Zoom calls. I'd love to do more in person, and we will be doing more in person, I'm sure, in due course.
Well, exciting times. It's amazing to launch something and to have that opportunity to try something. I think that's amazing. This is the part of the show where I ask my guests for their lockdown media. What would be the book, film, album, and box set that, if they were in a lockdown situation, what would get them through that? Something that you think that would be, if there was one of those, that would be the one.
I find myself reading either political books or historical books, not a lot of fiction. The book that I read, which I will read another time actually, because it's great. It's called The Opium Wars, and it's one of these fascinating stories that we don't know enough about. And it's really about the genesis of Hong Kong. Why was it that Hong Kong existed as part of the British territories off the coast of China? So I'd love to go back and read that again. In terms of fiction, there's a book I've read more than once, and I will read it again one time when there's time, is Brideshead Revisited. I just think that's a fantastic story. And film, my favorite film is Adaptation, which is a film that you'd have sold at Sony.
Absolutely.
And that's just a great film, endlessly inventive and utterly subversive and just fantastic. I love that movie.
Okay, that's a new choice. That's taken us in a new direction, which is great. We love innovation.
Album, I might have to come back to that one in a sec, but we can talk about box set. So The Americans, I think, is one of the all-time great series, but it's not one that a lot of people talk about. So when people talk about some of the greatest series, certainly of recent years, Breaking Bad will be on the list. Game of Thrones will be on the list. The Sopranos will be on the list. But The Americans doesn't always make that list, and it's partly because it's a slightly it's an understated show. There's nothing particularly kind of showy about it, but it is absolutely wonderful, and it is, I think, it's my favorite series of all time. And I'm aware that I haven't answered the question on album.
Okay, you'd either have no music in lockdown, or that's what I call music 243.
Yeah, it probably would be that volume now, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Okay, well, David Smyth, thank you so much for coming on the pod, and we will all, I'm sure, be on the lookout for the new service, and enjoy having something else that's free in our lives, which has always got to be thought of as a very good thing.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure, and have a great year. Thank you.